Hello.
Hi, Matthew.
Hi, it's good to see you. For those of you that don't know me, I am Matthew Ozawa, the stage director for A Beautiful Country.
Hi, for anybody who also doesn't know me, my name is Samantha Estrella. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the assistant director to A Beautiful Country.
And we are here to give you sort of a behind the scenes look at our process during a pandemic of bringing the theater to the film for you to see.
Yeah, yes. Um, Theater during this time. I feel like towards the beginning of the pandemic and quarantining, there's a there were like a lot of questions about art and what is the future of art, what is the purpose of art, and especially like the performing arts, um, which can be a large and tangential conversation. But I'm curious, Matthew, like during like this time of questioning purpose and what I study and what you do on the everyday, um, especially after having the show like canceled because I had like done the SMTV like Instagram takeover. We said it like kind of like had a final bow, like thank you. How did it feel when Priscilla or the department contacted you and said that the show was still happening?
I mean, very surprising because, of course, as soon as the pandemic hit and as long as it's been lingering, there's been a huge evolution and a huge amount of adaptability that we've had to go through in order to pursue and to continue to create theater and art during this time. It's such an unprecedented time. So I think that yes, we were only I think a week and a half away from moving into the theater
Mm-hmm.
during our rehearsal process in February and March. We were ready to go. We had staged so much of the show. And then with the sort of closure of things due to the pandemic, we said goodbye to each other. We thought the show was ending. I think there was a lot of grief with the fact that a piece that it's really about Asian American immigrant history and the sort of intersectionality of identity and the idea that individuals caught between two continents and cultures and languages and two
Yeah.
homes, that we were like saying goodbye to a piece that was so important and resonant for us.
Mm-hmm.
For the fact for it to come back is actually, and I've sort of been writing about this in the program notes,
Mm-hmm.
it's like we have gotten caught in between two worlds where we were caught, we're caught between like how we did it prior to the pandemic in the rehearsal room versus having to rethink the project for filming. And so it's been exciting and daunting because I, of course, am directing, I'm in Chicago. I've moved back to Chicago. And so I had to direct it remotely and figuring out what does that connection mean. Theater for us is so much about the live experience and interacting with each other, like visually and physically, and the sort of, kinesthetic response with one another. And you are the audience who are there like living in the moment with you, and that moment is only there for that 2 hour period and then gone.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, okay, like now I'm going to be remote, you're on campus, and our actors and collaborators are both in person and remote. What does it mean to create theater and then to transfer it into film? How do you kind of keep the essence of what our piece was about and the sort of rawness of it in something that then is going to turn into a crystallized version that if the audience were to see it 2 times, it's like the same every time, even though
Yeah.
their experience of it might be different. So what was your, in terms of these two dualities, these two worlds of the in-person rehearsal and then coming back
Mm-hmm.
during a pandemic to rehearse it, what was your experience like or different in both like being in the room, but also your perspective on how we were directing and creating this work?
Yeah. There is, as you know, as I feel like many people could assume, there's so many layers to that question. So I'll try to like condense my thoughts. I think something that we really discovered in hindsight, in this later half, in this revival of the production, was that while the intent and like the first time we were going through this, it was really, as you're mentioning about like the significance of representing like Asian American history and like this in this story, that is typically not highlighted like in a mainstream sort of viewing, I suppose, or platforming. The first half of the process was like really dedicated to these stories are real, these stories are need to be heard. These people and the nationalities and ethnicities and a lot of like the obstacles really need to be told. Like this is something that cannot be ignored because it has been ignored for so long, like this discrimination and violence against specifically Asian Americans in this country. So really hoping to teach and for folks to acknowledge, I feel like was a big part of our intention this first half. Then the second half, as you know, like the first couple of days, getting like warming the cast back up to doing theater after having such a traumatizing summer. And again, like in this like loop of like of self-purpose, especially for the graduate, like the students who had graduated, the designers who had graduated perhaps even, warming up the cast. We had gone through the Zoom recordings that we'd had done that last day during like that like little goodbye. I guess for folks who don't know, who were not in the room, the day that the school pretty much like announced that COVID was sending folks home and that all like extracurricular / events that required groups of people, like all those events were going to be canceled or at least paused at the time. We decided to record a run through of everything that we had already done with the show. So in August, again, just reintroducing folks to what it's like to work on a project again in this almost like new world. We saw that intention of teaching people is very tangible, very adamant. But now that our everyday is a lot more convoluted with worry, or can be at least, there's a lot more awareness to like safety, mental and physical. We decided to go into it with a lot more care and cushioning, and I think was an authentic expansion of the empathy that we were already sort of striving for achieving in this first round. It's just really honing into who is watching, where we are as a society, and especially for, I mean, something that you were so considerate, incredible for, at least I thought, was not wanting to create any more trauma, especially for our Asian American artists, student artists in this piece, because there was a lot already being thrown our way. So that was one of the bigger, I guess, more emotional and in craft storytelling shifts and differences between the two. But as you know, I was, and as you've mentioned, I was on campus, so we were able to have, I think it was Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sundays in person. And while in person, of course, like just having another human being, well, not even of course, like we can't even take that for granted anymore. Having another human being in that kinesthetic sort of energy created in that kind of work didn't change in terms of like I'm still human and that is another human being. And of course our incredible stage management team that was also there. That stayed the same, but everything else was so different. We had so many more like COVID procedures. I think we've all changed during the time between the closure and this restarting. But it was also really interesting to like work with you, like remote. Like you were on 3 screens during the first like 3 weeks that we had gotten back into a beautiful country. And you know, in this AD position, as it's part of like the directing like program, and like it's an assignment and requirement, and really taking advantage of like the observing of like this mentorship. I was just taking a lot of notes of how your direction shifted from whether everyone was on Zoom to partially on Zoom, to perhaps even you are the only person being on Zoom. So yeah, I mean, how was that for you to direct, especially in the Arthur Miller, which is such an expansive space, and you're not there physically?
Difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what we do is, or at least I feel that so much of my craft is connected specifically to what I can gauge from what people are going through in time and space.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're living in a little box, interacting with people, and you're right, I think there's a big difference between everyone being on Zoom, so everyone's in their own little boxes, in their own environments, often distracted by what is in their environment. And so part of it, that mode of directing in Zoom is keeping everyone focused and engaged, but finding ways to allow freedom and creative artistry in a world where Zoom has actually, even though it's been freeing and seeing everybody, we've gotten Zoom fatigue and feel a little stuck in these boxes and in being in the boxes all the time. Yeah. And so for any actor that was only remote and their only access to everybody was through the Zoom camera, you know, I really felt like it was my mission in a safe and collective way to make sure that everyone felt like they had ownership within their own box, as to what kind of art they were making and how they were transferring that to one another within the context of Zoom. But then as soon as you introduce people who are, you know, live in the theater or live in the rehearsal space with people in Zoom, it becomes trickier, because those that are in Zoom, you know, I always felt kind of a disconnect to not being there. I felt like I couldn't, you know, wasn't always sure if what I was saying was being heard. Mm-hmm. You know, of course, everyone's wearing masks, so you can't see any facial, you can't see any real recognition of like what people are experiencing or responding to. And in particular, in the Arthur Miller, when people are far away, depth was really difficult to see.
Yeah.
So having to use a lot of my own kind of, I guess my professional experience of understanding spatial relationships and using markers, you know, I'd often say, I think in rehearsals, like, hey, those that are in the theater, like, can you please go stand at X number of chairs, you know, away from you, or, you know, and try to gauge where they are on the stage. Whereas those things are just like a given when you're in person. I think the other big thing is, as a director, I like being actively involved, and I think that the energy that I give a space in person resonates to everyone that is there. And I like being able to be like very, you know, close to someone and having an in-depth conversation that lets them know, like, I completely value them and I'm there for them, and we're having a discussion, you know, that can feel safe and energized, and allow them the trust and comfort to be able to really like dig into material. But when you're removed in Zoom and they're, you know, alone on a stage in the Arthur Miller, technically anything I'm saying is being heard by everybody. So there's like the lack of intimacy is like thrown out the window, because, you know, as we experienced once we moved into the filming of it in Arthur Miller, and we had a lot of other collaborators, and technically I was on 2 different Zoom calls. I was on the Zoom call, you know, in the theater, being able to talk to the actors. Then there was a different separate Zoom. Sly Pup, who was videoing this, was giving me feed of some of their video monitors, not all of them, but for me to sort of see. And all of the designers and faculty and everyone else was on the separate Zoom. So then I would like toggle back and forth between talking to designers, talking in the theater, and then Sammie and I were oftentimes on our cell phone, just talking to each other. So again, like in terms of practicality speaking, that was a huge learning curve. Like figuring out, how do I take what I normally do in the theater, where like maybe we would talk and give a note, but then in Zoom, if I say it, everyone's going to hear it.
Right.
So finding different methods so that we can have a conversation that not everyone's hearing, but then, you know, a conversation that the designers can hear, that not everyone in the theater can hear, and then things everyone in the theater can hear. It is a wild way of figuring out, how do you communicate, and how do you, you know, embody the energy that you would have in a rehearsal space, and all the unspoken things that you can do in person, you really cannot do in Zoom. And I think there were a couple times where I was sort of like screaming into the Zoom camera because I felt disconnected. I felt like I didn't I didn't know what was happening in the space.
Right.
And that, you know, is kind of, it is frustrating. At the same time, our process has made me really realize how resilient we are. The fact that we were actually able to film our entire show, and anything that had a full cast, we completely re-envisioned it per COVID protocol, and figuring out ways within, you know, remote performers and in-person performers, how to like integrate all of this. It was like so highly complicated, but at the same token, the fact that everyone came together, you know, and the students in an incredible feat were so highly professional and gave their all and really cared about one another in the environment. It's a true testament to the sort of world that we created in February and March, the community that we created, but also the resiliency of artists and resiliency of our project in particular, to like really figure out ways that we could tell this story and bring it to an audience, and also allow the story to like create our own healing during what has been a really difficult time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just like, I'm just being thrown back. It's just talking about it. Film Week in particular, very hazy, very hazy memory to reflect on. But I truly believe that it was like such a symbiotic relationship in this theme of resilience. I feel like you were an incredible leader to be separated, and still, I know you felt that you were not connected, but Angela and I were always like, what is he talking about? Like and it could be technology too, just the volume of you like over a speaker, just like into the Miller. So I always felt like you were connected, but at the same time, I also don't want to. I really think it's 50-50. I don't want to like miscredit like all the actors who took the emotional energy to go through this, all the designers, like everyone who contributed to this project. Definitely were acts of resilience and strength, and trust in art, and trust in the craft, as well as trust in what this particular story is going to do, and what it's going to allow others to experience. I mean, I know I've learned so much as like a Latina woman, a BIPOC director, female director, and so I have my understandings of what it's like to have marginalized identities, and to have that lack of representation, or when I do have that representation, like I'm familiar, but I cannot speak for every person, every marginalized, especially like racial community in this country, and so it taught me a lot about. I mean, what the show is like 150 years, give or take, of what an immigrant or generations of that immigration can be in this country, and I mean, there's a lot to say. Like with the title, like A Beautiful Country, I think the title is very double-edged sword. Yeah, the show is brilliant. Che, you did a fantastic job of cultivating the story and like just piecing together the poetry that is life, with and and just staying true to the voices, like like creating this artistic way, but also not over romanticizing anything. And then it was told through the eyes of like a drag queen. Like that's spectacular. And the fact that the department said yes to you, saying yes to a beautiful country, like let's do this show. I feel like overall this has been like a big fight and achievement to get this out, and all reflected in the amount of filming and like on like in person, not in person.
And all the collaborators we had,
Yes,
right? I mean, we
yes,
had like
yes.
a Tai Chi choreographer, a Vogue choreographer, you know, a projection and video. I mean, fan dancers. We have animation. I mean, it is a very large scale project that was already difficult pre-pandemic.
Yes.
And then we added all these layers into this new version.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a great place for us to wrap it up.
Yes, yes, because I know that we can talk about this show forever, but it might just be up to everyone else to just see the show.
Yes, on December 2nd.
At 8 p.m. Join
And I think there's, a Facebook watch party.
Okay.
And it will be on YouTube.
Yes.
So definitely join us on December 2nd. We will be eagerly excited to witness our show with you on the 2nd.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I mean, just like the whole season, SMTV fully online. Like I think this is just like a super exciting moment for the overall department. So
right. For theater, musical theater, opera, all the work that the students have been working so hard to create during this first semester, during a pandemic.
And a couple of pandemics. We're going to include the race one. That's the point. Okay. Thank you, Matthew, for
so good seeing you.
Lovely to see
you. Of course. Take care. We'll be in touch.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.